Tom Campbell here. If you find something of significant value in our videos, please consider supporting their production through our Patreon account or through a one-time donation. The links are in the description below. Thank you and enjoy the video. I just want to say thank you to all of the people who are here and all of the people who are part of Patreon and or have given through some other means to be part of this group. I mean, it's really, really wonderful that you folks are helping, put a little bit of your money, where your heart is. That is really, really wonderful. We have about, you can correct me on this, Donna, but there's around 60,000 people who are subscribers to the YouTube videos, I believe, somewhere around 60,000 people. And then we have what Keith just said is about 200 people who were invited to this. Well, 200 out of 60,000 is 1/3 of 1%. So, 1/3 of 1% of the people who I guess routinely or often, look at the videos, because if you're a subscriber, that means you get an email every time a new video goes out. So these are people, I think, who would look at a lot of videos. So 1/3 of 1%, here you are. And
I think instead of calling them the Patreon support group, they should be called the elite group.
So anyway,
1/3 of 1%.
I just want to let you know that Donna and Keith and Pamela and I really, really do appreciate you folks. You really make a difference for us. You make a difference. And it's not just having YouTube videos without advertising. It's basically, at this time, everybody is hurting a little bit. Most people are a little lower, income or a little less affluent than they were,
last year
or the year before that. And we understand that, which makes it all the more impressive that you folks stand up and help us out a little bit. But of course, it hit us pretty hard, because our income was all based on those immersives, which were all over the world, different places. And they were kind of our big deal. And the one thing we did that brought in money, everything else is kind of free, but that was the one thing that brought in money. And then with the COVID, all that went away. We do some of it online, but the online is because there's not, we're not buying, rooms and meals and all that sort of stuff was much less expensive. So we charge a whole lot less for that. So more people will be able to attend it. And the attendance hasn't been all that great either, because a lot less of dispensable income, that they're in the world, just in general, in the population. There's a lot fewer people that have kind of extra money to spend on things that aren't necessities. So we've all tightened our belts, and we appreciate you sharing with us. So I just wanted to start with that. It's not a small thing. You think $10 a month, maybe is not such a really big thing, but it all adds up together to something that is extremely significant for us. So thank you very much before we start.
On behalf of Keith and I, thank you also for your kind support. We really do appreciate it. This is, the immersives were everything that we did as far as income. So you can imagine how much we appreciate what you do. All right, let's get started. Titus, please go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Tom.
Hello.
My question today will be on the topic of finances. Recently, I've been struggling with a fear in regards to finances, and mainly because of investments. I've been investing money, and I've been, losing some money here and there. And I've been trying to figure out what my fear is in regards to losing money and stuff. And mainly the question is, when it comes to working on a fear, how important is it to determine the exact fear that's triggering you to work on it? Because I've been struggling to kind of identify the root of that fear. And I was wondering if, is it enough to just kind of have the intention to let go of what I'm feeling, or do I have to specifically identify the fear to work on it?
Okay, good question. It may be helpful to some people to identify the root of the fear. You know, that could be a helpful part of the process, but it's not necessary. You don't have to do that. You can get rid of the fear just by having an intention, a strong intention to get rid of that fear. But the intention has to come from the being level. It's not a wish. A wish to get rid of the fear isn't all that strong. But a being level intent to get rid of that fear is really all you'll need. If you sincerely and you put some oomph behind that need to get rid of that fear, then you will do the right things. You will come up with the right strategy. You will find a way to get there. You know, the path will kind of open up in front of you as you have that intention. Now, it may not be quick, but it will work. But so it's not necessary to identify the source. Sometimes it's helpful to people, because particularly when they see that the source is just a little smoke out of their past, you know, it's not all that significant. You know, it was some kind of trivial issue that happened when they were 6 years old or something. And when they see that, it's like, oh, that's all. And it makes it easier for them to let go. But it's not necessary. And all fears don't come when you're 6 years old either, you know, so they all don't trace back to something that's like that. You know, it just, that is the way it is some of the time. So I wouldn't worry too much about the source of it for something like that. Just look at the fear itself. Say, what am I really afraid of? And the next thing to ask is, all right, let me imagine that the worst happens. What's the worst possible thing that could happen? All right, then accept that. Say, all right, if that happens, if that worst thing happens, I'll deal with it. My life will still be my life. I'll still have choices. You know, there'll still be people that I love and that love me, you know, what is it going to be like if the worst happens? And how could I weather that? What sort of adventure would that be? And if you then can accept the worst and say, well, you know, that's the worst. And all right, that would send me off on a totally different path than the one I'm on now. But it doesn't necessarily mean it would be a bad path. It doesn't necessarily mean I wouldn't learn anything or I wouldn't grow. You know, it just would be different. So when you accept that worst possible thing that could happen, that pulls the teeth out of the monster, because it doesn't have any bite left anymore if you're willing to accept the worst possible thing that could happen. So that's one way. That's another kind of way of looking at it. If it's something that you can accept, then, you know, it's not scary anymore. So that would be another approach for you to take. You know, so financially, you know, okay, what if you lost all your money? What if you invested and all the investments went belly up? All right, well then, you know, where would you be? What would you have? Would you still have a job? Would you still have family? Could you still pay the rent? You know, how would it really affect your life? And I don't know, you'll have to come to all those conclusions yourself. You know, how would it really affect your ability to grow, to become love, to, you know, get rid of fears? Would it make it easier? Would it make it harder? Or would it not be relevant? Would it just be a matter of, well, it would feel better, you know, if I had more resources, that'd just be more convenient. But how important is convenience to your growth? So you see, you take those kinds of attitudes, and there's an awful lot of things that most of us fear that really, if they happened, wouldn't be that big a deal. What it would mean, it would kick us out of the rut that we were in. It would kick us out of the mindset we have of the way life needs to be. And we would start off on some new kind of adventure in a new sort of way and it might end up actually being good for us. So when you look at life that way, like, okay, whatever happens, happens, and I'll make my best choices that I can with it and grow. And when you think of that, then there's very little out there in life that can frighten you. That gets rid of most of your fears.
Well, thank you very much. That was very helpful.
All right, Tom, I'm going to read a question submitted by Costas, who's here today. Is it possible for an IUOC, after the death of its avatar, when choosing a new one to play, to preset some kind of a sign so it can be reminded of its origin and its purpose early on in the game?
Yeah, that's possible. As you come to having new avatars and keep going through these cycles of experience, often you'll find little tricks and little things that help you, little nudges that you might set up or might be set up for you. Sometimes the system, even without you being a part of it, will set up little nudges like that, that somewhere through your life, something will just kind of happen out of the blue that will kind of nudge you toward a more productive path. So yes, you can set some of those up on your own, and others may be set up for you. But that's not all that unusual a thing to have an arrangement like that that says, okay, I'm gonna set up this condition so that at this point in my life, if I'm not getting it, I'll get a good swift kick just where I need it, to wake me up, or I'll get an opportunity that will take me in a different direction, or something will happen that will knock me out of my the rut that I'm in, and I'll start off on a new path. Sure, those things can be pre-planned, but remember that all planning is kind of iffy because we have free will and we don't necessarily end up at where we think we might end up in this process. With that free will, the best of plans often unravel when you have a bunch of people with free will interacting with each other. So planning is not a sure thing, but it still can be done and it still can be effective.
All right, thank you, Tom. We're moving on to Michael Sutton. Please go ahead, Michael.
I get on unmute. Yeah, I'm Michael Sutton. I'm the chair of the Chess Institute of Canada. Just to give you some background on the Chess Institute, when I inherited a failing organization, and barely getting by on lack of funding, and I figured, oh, this can't get worse. And then I got hit by a full province-wide teachers strike, which just about wiped out our in-class teaching. And I was saying, well, this can't get worse. Then I got hit by a pandemic. And then I kind of realized maybe this is a little bit of an LCS challenge. So in the last 9 months, we've grossly revamped our teaching model. We've advanced life skills. I think it's an amazing experience. We are going in the right direction. So anyway, my question is one that comes from Dr. Jordan Peterson. He says there's a 60-40 split between male and females on communication preference versus objects. An example might be that women like social media, men like working on hot rods. Is an example, and I've run into this a little bit with chess. Like, I want to get more women into chess. I think the Queen's Gambit has really helped, but I think that's a really interesting question because there's no difference in intelligence between the sexes, but why is this preference split? Does it come from consciousness? So there's my loaded question for the day.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a good question, and yes, indeed, this idea, the kind of the politically correct idea as of about 20 or 30 years ago in our culture has been that male and female are all just the same. We come with different reproductive parts, but other than that, it's all interchangeable. We're all just people and we're all the same. And nothing could be farther from the truth. It just isn't like that. Gender makes a big difference in the way we think, in the way we perceive our reality, and what's important to us and what's not. Males and females have different ways of, how can we say, assessing their reality. They not only assess it in different ways, but they even have different skill sets that they use, different ways that they take in data. So we really are very, males and females in our species, at least, it's not necessarily true of all species, but particularly in humans, are very different from each other. We perceive things differently. Different things catch our attention. Different things are important to us. We feel more at ease and more relaxed in very different kinds of environments. So I would say that you should start asking some ladies who are interested in chess of why they're interested in chess and what appeals to them with the game, and see if you don't come up with some common factors that are a little different when you ask the men. Why are you interested in chess? Why did it attract you? So I'd start with that and see if you can't figure out some way to work your advertising and your marketing to get people interested in the game so that you appeal to, more women. If you'd like more ladies in your group, it's the way you present it. If you present it in a way that men relate to, oh, I relate to that. I'd like to be more like that. So maybe I'll start chess because that'll help me go that way. That won't necessarily be the same for women. They don't necessarily want to move in the same directions in the same way that the men do. So no, I don't know what it is about chess that would be more or less attractive to women. And you'll have to figure that one out.
Okay.
But definitely, I would say there's no doubt differences in the way each gender would approach that game and the reasons that they would enjoy playing it. And you may find that it may be very, very difficult to get, a lot more women into it. It may be that chess is not as suited to the female mind or the female attitude, I guess I should say, as it is to males. It reminds me of a thing that I think it was one of the Scandinavian countries, I think it was Norway, where they decided some years ago that they wanted more female engineers. Engineering was almost, like 90% male. And they thought that was an inequity, that they should try to get more female engineers. So they started to push that. They started to advertise it. They started to try to encourage females to go into engineering. They encouraged it with advertising. They encouraged it in the schools. They encouraged it as much as they possibly could. And at the end of something like 7 or 8 years, maybe a decade of full out encouraging, they'd raised the number of engineers, females, from like 5% to maybe 7%. And they realized that it just wasn't working. All right, they did increase the number of female engineers, but it just wasn't that significant because it's not a kind of thing that a lot of females want to do. That's not the way they're put together. They would rather do other sorts of things. Feels more natural and better to them, and they can connect more with it. So so you may find that as well. I don't know. So it's not necessarily that you're not just doing it right if you don't succeed. It may be a harder problem than you think, or maybe not. Maybe it's just appealing to a different sensitivity. Yes, women are definitely more social, more connected. They have a thing called own group preference. They feel more relaxed and at ease in the company of other women. They make they connect with other women in a network, a supporting network. when you look at the little 13-year-olds, we call that a girl gang, you know, a bunch of girls all hang out together, you know, they're this little peer group. But that's just a thing that men don't do, women do. So lots of differences there, Michael.
Okay.
How it's going to work with your chess, I don't know.
Yeah, we talked to two top psychologists at the London Chess Conference, and they were both women, and they said we've got to take the competitive edge off and make it more social and more
Yeah.
interesting.
That would,
So,
yeah, I think that would ring true for me. You know, I would say that's probably true. It needs to be less competitive, not so much of a cerebral thing as it is a social thing.
okay, thank you, Tom. Good advice.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Tom, our next question from Laura Cardari. She has a few, but I'm going to rotate her questions just as I'm doing with yours, one at a time. Can the LCS be surprised by the choice or decision of a free will awareness unit? And can this theory of multiple universe be excluded from this notion of free will?
Can the LCS be surprised? Well, yes, of course. The LCS can be pleasantly surprised or, you know, unpleasantly surprised. It depends on the choices that you make. Mostly, the choices that we make are probably pretty much in line with the choices we've made before. I mean, most people don't just go off on a radical different way of looking at things all of a sudden. So for the most part, our choices are probably pretty much in line with who we are, what we've done, you know, in the immediate past, if not the distant past. But sometimes that's not true. Sometimes people dramatically change in a very short amount of time. It's not as common as a slow, gradual change, but it happens. And when it does, I think everybody's surprised, including the LCS. Probably even the person that's making the change is surprised as well. So yes, surprises occur. That's the whole point about free will, is it's free. It can't be, you know, it can't be predicted exactly. You know, you can look at the possibilities and probabilities, but until that choice is made, it's up to that individual. Now, the many worlds basically tries to solve this problem of choice. You know, they would like to say that there is no free will and that you don't need free will because everything that could possibly happen does happen. And it happens in some alternative physical universe. This is a very long stretch. So what that means is if I scratch my head here with my right hand, to you that may look like my left hand, but you know, my camera is mirror imaged, so it may look a little odd. But you know, if I do this instead of this, then a whole universe, not just an Earth, but a whole universe needs to be split off where I did this and another universe where I did that. Everything that's different, every difference that you make, every choice that you make splits off another universe with fully peopled with everybody else in it, you see, and just with that difference in mind. So everything that possibly could happen does happen in the many worlds viewpoint. And that so we live through all the possibilities, no need for any free will choice. Actually, there's no need for choice at all. That theory says that there's not only no free will, but you know, there is you know, no consciousness, no time. Time doesn't really exist. It's just time exists like it does in a movie. It's just a series of stills, and it's not really time going by. It's just the stills are going by. Anyway, all of that has logical problems. That many worlds thing. It's ridiculously expensive in the sense that you have to create new universes for every change. An electron flips from spin up to spin down. A whole new universe is needed, even down at the particle level. Otherwise, you can't get all the possibilities. Now, you might think, well, it'd be nice to say when things that really don't have much logical connection downstream, like whether I scratch my head on this side or that side, that's irrelevant. It's not going to change anything downstream because I did one way or the other. Those things you could just kind of say, well, let's not track those. They don't count. The electron flipping, that's too small a level to count. So we just don't count those things. Well, they can't say that. That would make more sense because that would eliminate about 99.99% of all the things that happen in the world that don't really have a logical path that goes forward. But if you make that kind of a proclamation that only the stuff that matters will go forward, then you have to have the judge of what matters. Now you have to have consciousness, and you have to have a judge who makes that choice, and how is that choice made? You see, and that now breaks the whole reason for having the many worlds, which is to escape free will, and escape consciousness, and escape time, which means to support materialism and determinism. So the many worlds is something that's made up to support materialism and determinism, and still have all the variation that we see here in this world. We see variation, we see choice. And see, the many worlds would explain that. We're just skipping from reality frame to a reality frame, putting together a particular life of ours, and there's somebody else that's living all the other choices that we could have made. Well, that is way too much information, to compute all of that possibilities. Whereas in the MBT model, all that's done just in probability. It doesn't require new worlds, new universes. We still have everything that's possible and the probability of it, actually being actualized. So we still look at all the possibilities, but only in probability. And then we, through our choices, just actualize those things we actualize. And we create our life through our choices. We create who we are through our choices. And that puts the responsibility on us. You see, that gives us free will. That gives us purpose. There's a purpose to our life. And it's making those choices and lowering our entropy and growing up. That gives significance to ourselves and what it is we do. All of the things that are lacking from the many worlds model. So, yes, the LCS can indeed be surprised because we do indeed have free will. And it's not kind of the sterile expansion through all the possibilities that you get with many worlds, where there is no choice, there is no purpose, there is no point. It just is. And there's no source for it. There's no end to it. There's no purpose for it. It just is that way because that's the only way they can explain that it appears like we're making choices, but still maintain the fact that there can't be any choices because determinism does not allow any choices, and materialism requires determinism.
Thank you, Tom. That was excellent. Our next person with a question is Arthur. Please go ahead, Arthur.
Okay, I'm gonna read it. So I'm a beginner in meditation. I've been meditating for over a year every day, and I hear or feel this internal, real subtle sound that feels to be inside of my mind. There's nothing else but it. As soon as I close my eyes, I hear it or feel it, or even while awake when I focus. When I'm meditating, sometimes I get bored with it and start doing other things. I've been practicing healing, which seems to be easier for my intellect not to jump in. I also have a belief that's probably not helping my meditation practice. The belief is that in order to be able to achieve higher states of consciousness or really engage with the LCS, we have to have spent a few lifetimes meditating. Like when you mentioned that your past 2 lifetimes you're being prepared for this one, or like reading Yogananda's book, you hear about yogis meditating 20 hours a day for 20 years. And this seems so far away for me that maybe real deep in my subconscious, I believe it's going to take a lot of time for me to experience these higher states of consciousness. On the other hand, I feel that if we have a serious practice and serious intent, we can achieve it slowly and keep developing it. Can you please comment?
Sure. You don't need 20 hours a day, you know, for 20 years. That's overkill. That's more than you need to put into it. Yes, some people do that. Some people, you know, are that extreme with their meditation, but it's unnecessary. You can go just as far as you have the capability to go with just what you're doing, just meditating, you know, once a day. That will get you where you need to go. And it won't take forever. It's not like, oh, well, that'll take me the next 100 lifetimes, you know, at that rate. No, it's not like that. You can make just as much progress. It's not the quantity, it's the quality. So it doesn't matter how many hours you put in. It matters more that your intent is focused on growing up, on becoming love, on lowering your entropy, that your intention is focused on that, making your best choices that you can in everyday choices. If you do just that, if you just have your intent focused on every choice you have to make, and particularly, of course, these are choices inside relationships. You know, what do you say to people? How do you react to people? You know, what is it that you can give? Trying to get rid of that fear, get rid of that ego. If you focus on that and never meditate, you'll still do very well. The meditation isn't necessary. People who don't meditate but still do very well, they do something that's sort of like meditation. They kind of slip into an empty space and you know, kind of feel things, but it's not a formal meditation. They don't pay attention to their breathing. They don't say a mantra. They don't really do anything too special. They just kind of drop out of this reality for a little while and spend some time in a deeper space. That's how they would express it. And they've never learned to meditate. So all the things you need to do, you can just do without any formal structured practice if you really have a focused intent on doing that. Now, that's sort of the key. Many people don't have a really focused intent on growing up, and instead, they meditate regularly every day or twice a day. And that can help them form that intent, because when they're in that meditation state, they're more aware of themselves just as consciousness. They're more aware that they just, you know, of who they are and what they are. They're more in touch with themselves. And that can help them gain that focus that they need to grow up. But it's not necessary. It can be helpful. So meditation is a good thing because it'll help quiet your mind. You'll learn to get all the chatter that's yammering away in your mind all the time. You'll learn to recognize that and to let it go. And that's a big help for getting into that still space. But you can do that with or without meditation. Meditation is just a tool that will help you do that, but it's not a necessary thing. So don't get too wound up over the amount of hours that you spend in meditation. If you just have a serious intent of, I want to grow up, I want to not be fearful, I want to see what my fears are and get rid of them. My relationships need to be about other. How can I help? How can I be of service? What can I do? How can I make other people's lives better? Now, it doesn't mean that you don't think about yourself. You still have to, keep a job, pay the mortgage, put gas in the car. You've got responsibilities to people and to yourself. And you have to be mindful of that as well. So you don't just become a nobody that is focused on other people. You still are somebody, and you have to take care of yourself. You have to pick up after yourself. You have to, live in a neat and a clean environment. You have to lower entropy. So the idea is just live your life. Be connected to other people. Have relationships, meaningful relationships. Get to know people. Get connected. And make the best choices you can. That's the best way to go. That's the best way for growth, is just to do that. Now, if meditation helps that process because it puts you into a state where you can kind of assess where you are and where you're going and how successful you are, and you can get that non-noisy mind, well, then meditation is a good tool. And I generally kind of would encourage everybody to meditate regularly. It's a very good thing, but it's not the thing. It's just a tool, just one of many tools that you can have to grow up. It's mostly about engaging life, making good choices. You see, so that's the downside of meditation. People who meditate 20 hours a week, for 20 years, take themselves out of relationship, take themselves out of connection with a lot of the outside world. They sequester themselves. They go off and, sometimes are hermits, live in caves somewhere. And you may develop part of you that way, but there's parts of you that are very difficult to develop that way. Where the rubber meets the road as far as being able to give goes is when you interact with people, all sorts of people, and how you deal with that. So if you spend 20 hours a day in meditation, you're not interacting with a lot of people. And I would say that that's not such a great road to growing up. That's probably a slow path to growing up. Instead, what you end up there, if you get too focused on meditation, you probably end up in a space where you feel that you are very grown up, because inside your own mind, you understand lots of things. You have great awareness of things. You've developed all that in your meditation. Well, all of that's we could put over in the box of theory, but when it gets to application, which is dealing with people, dealing with rude people, dealing with angry people, dealing with hurt people, and dealing with lovely people. That's just all part of life. That's the application. And when you get to applications, meditating 20 hours a day for 20 years isn't helpful. It takes you out of that practice of application. So you end up growing unevenly. There's parts of you that if you meditate that much will grow a lot, and other parts of you will be stunted. And it's the same if you do it the opposite way. If you don't have any introspection, you don't have any sense of who you are and what you're trying to become, and that you're trying to get rid of fear and become love. If you don't have any of that, and all you're doing is just going through life and interacting however you interact, well, now that's the opposite unbalanced side. You see, now you're still unbalanced. It's all application without any direction, without any focus, without any, your choices are almost all random choices, or just whatever you feel like at the time. It's not necessarily taking you into a profitable direction. So that's the opposite amount of unbalance. And you'd like to stay right between those two opposites. You'd like to be balanced in all ways. You'd like to have a very rich interactive life with other people. And you'd also like to have time to contemplate and to feel and to explore your own mind and your feelings and how am I doing? And balance is very important.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Tom, our next question is from Max Brecco. Max is the Flaska water bottle inventor, and he's interested in how water and consciousness interact. In one of the previous videos, you talked about water and its possibilities with consciousness. The topic is influencing future probabilities with our consciousness. Water as a matter with high level of uncertainty is very easy to be influenced. I'm referring to Dr. Masaru Emoto's experiments where water creates beautiful crystals if exposed to loving thoughts. On the other side, it creates chaotic patterns if exposed to negative thoughts. My question is, what happens if two persons are involved in that kind of experiment? There would be two persons on one glass of water. One person would be sending loving thoughts to the water, and the second person would be skeptical that anything will happen at all. Would there be any measurable difference in the water? We live in a multiplayer game, and please explain what happens if we have players working in opposite directions. The first one sending love to the water, and the second one being neutral or even sending negative emotions to water.
Okay, well, I can answer that in a very general way. It doesn't have to be focused on water. That would be just one test of it. But, you and your family may be planning a picnic next weekend, next Saturday, and you really like the sun to be shining and not to be raining because picnics aren't much fun in the rain. And somebody else may have just planted some grass and really would like the rain to happen and to water that grass. So somebody has their intent, oh, sunshine, sunshine, sunshine next Saturday. And somebody else is saying rain, rain, rain for the next week. It needs to rain next 2 weeks till my grass gets going. And what happens? Those two things are, they're one's pushing and one's pulling, on the same thing. So that's true of many things that we do. Well, there's 7.5 billion of us on this planet. There's lots of cases where there's millions pushing on one thing and other millions pulling in the opposite direction. Well, how does that work? Well, your intention modifies future probability, but so does everybody else's intention. So you just take a vector sum of all those intentions. So you sum up all the I want it to rain and sum up all the I don't want it to rain. And whichever's stronger, well, the probability moves in that direction. So it's just a matter of having a stronger intent than the person who's having the opposite intent. Okay, if you want your thing to happen. So yes, if you have that glass of water and there's somebody who's trying to make it ugly, hate, misery, that sort of thing that's going on. They're trying to create ugly water, ugly crystals when it freezes. And somebody else is doing the love and peace and caring, trying to make pretty crystals. Well, do the experiment. And if one of them was much stronger than the other, then the one that was much stronger in their intent. Now, how do you get strong in an intent? Well, it has a couple of components. One, it has to be low noise. In other words, all that chattering going on in the mind, that's noise. So you have to get rid of that chattering. Well, meditation's a good way to learn how to do that. So that's one thing. You have to have a low noise mind. Secondly, your focus has to be very, very good. You have to just focus on exactly what you want, not just kind of a general focus that's, I hope the weather's better, or I hope the picnic's good, but you really focus on exactly what you want. I want the sun to shine from, at least during the afternoon. You have to be precise. And then you have to put some oomph behind it. You need to give it some energy. You need to really care about the results. That caring about the results, really caring about the results, is what puts the energy behind it. So if you get all those things lined up to where you get out of your intellect, that's one thing, get out of your intellect into an intuitive space. From that intuitive space, you need to have low noise, you need to have sharp focus, and you need to have oomph. You need to have some energy, some push on it. Well, that will make your intention strong. If somebody else's intention has a lot of noise in their mind, has distractions, is not well focused, and they're doing it from their intellect rather than from that intuitive space, well, then their intent's going to be very weak. So it's just a matter of push and pull, strength. Whoever has the stronger push or the stronger pull, that's the way the probabilities are going to go. That's why when we look around at our environment here on planet Earth and we see kind of the state of humanity and where we are and the level of our quality and the kind of things we do to each other, we look at the greed, the want to control, want to manipulate, want to take advantage. We see all of that stuff going on. Well, that represents us, you see. Yes, there are people pulling the other way, but what we see is what represents the average of what we are. It represents who we are, the quality of consciousness that we have, because there's more people wanting to take advantage of each other than there are people who don't. So we see a lot of people out there trying to find advantages. How can I win at somebody else's expense? So that's the way that works. When you have different people pulling in different directions, the group, I wouldn't say the one, the group that puts the most effort, has the most clarity, the most focus, is working from the intuitive level, there's the one that has the most power. And that's the way the probability will shift to that side. So that's kind of the idea. It doesn't really have much to do with water. Water would just be one way that you could test that. You might find that if you had one person trying to give it negative thoughts, another giving it positive thoughts, you may find that the ice freezes in different ways. There may be spots of it that are beautiful and other spots that are ugly, all in the same freezing. Or depending on if one is more dominant, much stronger than the other, then it may be mostly positive or mostly negative based on that. But it's not that the water is somehow magical or conscious or has memory, but as you said, the water, or the way water freezes, the possibilities of how water can freeze are huge. You've maybe heard the old saying about no two snowflakes are exactly alike. That's because there's so many billions of ways in which water can crystallize. So there's a huge amount of uncertainty. And whenever there's a lot of uncertainty, then it's much easier to affect something with your intent, because you have lots and lots of probabilities that are all about the same. Oh, okay, there's a million ways that water could freeze, and each one of them has the same probability or almost the same probability of happening. So now an intent can move this kind of freezing up and that kind down, and it makes a big difference. Then you're much more likely to see the pretty stuff rather than the ugly stuff, because you have lots of nearly equal possibilities. So water's a real good example of something that is easy to change with intent. Another thing that's easy to change with intent is your health or the health of somebody else. That's why using your mind to heal someone is easy to do. Most anybody can learn, to do that, because biology has so much uncertainty in it. There's so many things that your body can do. There's so many possibilities. It's not all that rigid. Yes, people who have stage 4 cancer spread all through their body and less than 3 months to live walk away with no cancer at all. Sometimes, you see, there's possibilities, even ones like that beat the odds. They happen every day. They're not the majority. Mostly, if you have that kind of stage 4, you're going to die. Statistics would say that, but some people just don't. Miracles occur every day in the medical profession. things that are outside of the typical statistic, because we're all different and our biology is hugely complex. So that makes healing other people one of the easier things to do because of all the uncertainty, just like water. Affecting the way water freezes is one of the easier things to do. So that's how the push-pull works. It just depends on who's got more strength, if you will, who exerts more power. And I gave you the kind of things that enable one to be more or less powerful. So making wishes from the intellect, oh, I wish this would happen, doesn't carry much weight. But getting into that intuitive space and having a clear, focused, noise-free intent, now that can move the probability some.
Thank you, Tom. Sarah, please go ahead with your question.
Thanks, Donna. Hi, Tom. I had a question about the evolution of consciousness. So as consciousness lowers its entropy, it forms more structure and higher order. I just don't understand, what is it? Where is it? I assume it's not this physical or other physical universes. They're just labs and they're temporary. So what is it that we are forming? Where is it? What does it do? That order, that structure.
Okay. Well, in order to understand how order and structure, makes a difference to consciousness, think of consciousness itself as an information system. Okay. Consciousness is awareness that has a choice. That's my definition of consciousness now. And that's just choice is, awareness itself. Aware of what? Well, that's information. Awareness is aware of what? The what is the information. So if consciousness is information and all the bits in this information system are random, then there's no information.
Yeah.
That's high entropy. So you structure things in order to create information. So the consciousness then structures something, and that something might be useful. It may be a symbol. It may be a metaphor. So it creates things that have meaning to itself. And as it creates these meanings, it's creating information. That information can turn into attitudes. It can turn into, knowledge. So it's creating the things in which it makes choices between. So that's what entropy reduction or order, making more order, has to do with information. It's the information itself. So what's going on there is that when you have an aha moment, or when you suddenly realize something, what you're doing is lowering entropy. Things are falling, pieces are falling into place. Things are making more sense. That means you have, lower entropy, more structure, more order. So does that help, or am I missing your question, Sarah?
So does that apply to the LCS as well? Like it creates information for itself to?
Well, the larger consciousness system just started as probably just a binary, this and that. And then it evolved. So it's just awareness. And awareness is aware of what it's aware of. That's can be described as it's information, describes what it's aware of. So yes, it just made up, what was of value to it. So let's say as a very simple binary, it only was aware that it could be in state A or state B, state 1 or state 0. And that was it. Well, because it's consciousness and it's really these two states that it has decided are two different things, two different states you could be in. Well, these are in its mind. These are in the mind of consciousness. So consciousness says, well, if there's two states, why not three? Why not a 1, a 0, and another 0, or a 1 and a 1 and a 0 and a 0? Oh, look, I can make a pattern, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0. And now that pattern, is information. I can make predictions on what's going to come next, in that pattern. I can make patterns of patterns. Oh, look, I can invent arithmetic. I can have a 1 and a 1 and a 0 to 0, and I can say, oh, there's 4 things altogether. Oh, look, 2 and 2 make 4. 2 zeros, 2 ones, 4 things. I can generate arithmetic, and arithmetic can generate algebra. And you see, it just starts very simply and making patterns, giving those patterns meaning, giving them some sort of context, and that is valuable to the consciousness. And consciousness just wants to find more order, because less order is moving toward dissolving, coming apart. It's moving toward death. So it wants to create more order, but not just random order for the sake of order. It wants to create meaningful order, order that means something to it, something it can do something with, like arithmetic. You know, you can do lots of things with arithmetic. That has logical consequences that just go on and on and on. So it grows just out of its desire to create more information by lowering its entropy. And then it gets to the point where it realizes it's one monolithic thing and it's limited just by its own one thing. So it breaks itself into these pieces. All the IUOCs are just little subsets of it, and each one has free will. And now all those free wills interacting, the possibilities go way up. And now you have a social system. And with a social system, you now have a much more well-defined arrow toward lower entropy, because social systems optimize themselves, lower their entropy optimally through cooperation and caring. If every little individual is all out just about themselves, well, they can't make much together. There's just a whole lot of ones and zeros running around, not really doing anything, not building anything much. But if they get together, well, there's lots of things that they can do if they cooperate. So then you get to the point that cooperation and caring and working with each other is how you lower entropy. So then that gets us up to where we are. Love is the answer. We're here to grow up. We're here to learn how to care, learn how to be of service, not just be self-centered about us. So that kind of derives the whole thing. So you see, this idea of lowering entropy is the driving force in consciousness. That's why consciousness keeps moving on. It's evolving to states of lower entropy. Its only other choice is to de-evolve towards states of higher entropy. It's very, very difficult just to stay in between those two. You tend to evolve or you tend to de-evolve. You can waggle around in the middle between the two for some, but eventually you end up going more one way than the other, because the more it is you evolve, the easier it is to evolve more. And the more you de-evolve, the easier it is to de-evolve more. So it's hard to stay forever in that land between them. You have to kind of be moving toward evolving and lowering entropy, or you're going the opposite direction. So that boils down to the choice that the system has as live or die, evolve or dissipate into nothing. So that's how it works out. So the system is just creating ways in which it can create meaningful patterns, meaningful order, meaningful connections. And then once we have all the IUOCs to interact with, now those connections are also called relationships. And they're a whole lot more complicated as relationships than they were just as connections. Like mathematics is rather, is rather plain and simple and not all that complicated. You just know the rules. But relationship, dealing with two things with free will, now the complexity gets really deep. So it creates more ways of interacting, more potentiality for the system. There's more ways that you can grow now. Once we get to relationship between things that each have free will, suddenly there's tons of more ways to grow, lots of more states to evolve into. You see, so that's kind of the progression, Sarah, from a simple things, just making choices, and the choices, it wants to be meaningful to itself, something it can build on, something it can construct. And mathematics is one of those sets of choices, runs down that path. And others are relationship. But for relationship, you needed at least two things with free will. Well, we have 7.5 billion things with free will here interacting on this planet. And, you can see by what we've created, it needs some work. We're not all that evolved just yet, but we're working on it. So does that help, or am I still missing?
Yes, thank you.